The stranger set the envelope on my table like he was dropping off the check for a breakfast he didn't eat. He didn't look at me, didn't check my reaction. He just said one line, his voice flat and clipped like it had been cut with a blade. "Tonight, you'll see who your husband really is." Then he walked away. No turning back. No hint of emotion left behind. I looked at the envelope on the table, sitting next to the glass of water I hadn't touched. It was white, thin, and had no sender's name. It didn't belong to my morning. I opened it slowly, not because I was scared, but because I don't like rushing things that show up out of nowhere. Inside, the address of a big hotel in the city, a room number, and a time underlined. No note, no signature, no explanation. I slipped the paper back into the envelope and set it on the table like I was putting down something someone had forgotten. I didn't see any reason to turn this into something serious. Trent, my husband, could have been at a hotel for work. He was the kind of man who'd disappear for a week to meet clients, and I never once worried about it. I got up and left the cafe, the envelope tucked neatly in my coat pocket. My mind wasn't heavy, just curious. To explain why I didn't panic, I have to go back a few months. I'm Moraine, a freelance designer. Years of working with color trained me to notice the smallest changes in a frame. I don't talk much, not because I'm closed off, but because I like hearing how people reveal themselves in every sentence. And Trent, my husband, is the kind of two-faced person you wouldn't notice unless you stood very close to his life. At home, Trent was the kind of man women loved to brag about, saying they were lucky. He was handsome in a way that made you look twice. His smile rubbed off on whoever he talked to. He could cook, he played with our son, and he knew exactly when to shrug things off to keep the house calm. He liked carrying our son on his shoulders, liked feeding me a piece of whatever dessert he just made, liked creating the feeling that family was the only thing that mattered to him. But the moment he stepped outside, he became someone else. His eyes cooled in a deliberate way. His voice dropped quieter. His features sharpened, serious, hard to read, a kind of cold that made strangers keep their distance. And because of that, I used to think he couldn't possibly cheat. A man who held the whole world at arm's length. How would he ever open himself to another woman? That was why I trusted him without question. And that same reason was what kept me from seeing the rest of him. There were times my friends told me they'd seen Trent with a very beautiful woman. Not once, a few times. They sent photos, sent messages, said they looked closer than they should have been. I looked at the photo and just smiled. There are plenty of people who look alike out on the street. And when Trent came home, he was always cheerful, hugging our son, asking if I'd eaten, telling funny stories from work. He was so natural about everything that any suspicion felt unreasonable. I trusted him the way you trust a chair you've sat in for years. No checking, no questions. He kept me calm with steady sweetness. He lived as if betrayal didn't exist in his vocabulary. On nights he traveled for work. I slept fine. When he was gone for 3 days, I didn't even think about the idea of another woman. I just assumed he was busy. Maybe he was too good at playing the good husband at home, or maybe I wanted to believe it that badly. Still, lately, there were a few small details. Not big enough to accuse him of anything, but enough for me to take note. One time his phone buzzed, and he turned it off quicker than usual. Another time, he stepped outside to take a call, even though he'd always taken them right next to me before. There were moments when I saw his eyes shift for a split second when he got a call from S, a name not saved in full. He covered it with a smile and said, "Just a client." The explanation landed lightly, like setting a napkin on a table. Clean, simple, harmless. I didn't push back. I just noted it. That's how I am. One night he came home later than usual, and the scent on his shirt wasn't the cologne I knew. He said it was from a coworker. I nodded, but those little pieces were starting to tap against each other, just not enough for me to connect them yet. So when that stranger handed me the envelope this morning, I didn't immediately assume something bad. I'm not the type who sees a shadow and thinks ghost. I figured it had something to do with Trent's work. He dealt with lots of clients, lots of events. Hotels weren't unusual for him. But even though I didn't believe anything was wrong, I still slipped the envelope into my pocket, not to chase the truth, just so it wouldn't sit on my table without a place to belong. I still trusted him at that point. Trusted the man who walked through the door every night with a warm smile and arms that knew exactly how to hold our son. I didn't know that night, everything I believed would be peeled back layer by layer, right on the schedule written in that envelope. From the moment I left the caf with it in my pocket, the day stayed normal to the point of feeling intentional. Trent texted me a few short lines, saying he'd be home late because of a team meeting. The message was brief, no emojis, no extra words. A kind of short I was used to, but today it carried a quiet gap I couldn't name. I looked at the text for 1 second, then put my phone away. I wasn't upset. I just noted it. That evening, he came home exactly like always, opened the door, called my name and our son's with that warm voice. He hugged our boy, kissed his hair, asked what we'd eaten. Everything matched the picture of the man in the kitchen, in our home, in the soft closeness I knew. But while I was pouring water, his phone buzzed. He turned his body away and flipped the screen face down, quick and smooth like someone who'd practiced it. A small cut. I didn't react. I just set the glass on the table, my eyes pausing a beat longer than usual. I saw his hand tighten slightly on the edge of the counter, as if he realized he'd moved too fast. He looked at me and gave a small smile. Annoying client. I nodded. No questions. But I kept noting it. In the days that followed, the small changes started repeating. Trent came home late more often. The reasons stayed the same: clients, projects, urgent meetings. But something in his tone when he texted me shifted. Colder, shorter, like he was sending the message just to check off a minor obligation. I didn't ask where he was. I just read it and added it to my map. His phone almost never lay face up anymore, always screen down. And every time it lit up, his hand reacted instantly. Lock it, pocket it, change the subject. A man with nothing to hide doesn't move that fast. One weekend afternoon, a friend sent me a message along with a photo. In it, Trent stood inside a restaurant with a very beautiful woman. Long hair, fitted dress, her body angled toward him more than what you'd call polite. The lights inside reflected off the wine glasses in front of them. My friend texted, "I think you should see this." I zoomed in on the photo, the slight tilt of the face, the hair that looked like Trent's, the way he stood, but I looked at it for only 5 seconds before replying with one short line. That's not him. My friend said she saw him with her own eyes. I still didn't believe it. I believed in the version of Trent in our kitchen every night. The man who fed our son each bite of meat, who always asked if I was tired, who laughed loud whenever our boy said a word wrong. I didn't want to believe that man could turn into someone else the moment he stepped outside. I didn't think I was blind. Back then, I just thought I knew my husband better than anyone. The first thing that made me pause happened on an ordinary evening. I was cutting fruit for our son when Trent's phone rang. He was in the living room, the phone on the table. I heard the ringtone, along with a soft woman's laugh leaking through the speaker. Not loud, not clear, but clear enough to know it wasn't the TV. Trent rushed to the table and ended the call like putting out a fire. I looked at him. He looked at me. In that half second, we stood inside a truth neither of us named. Then he smiled, his voice light as if nothing happened. Picky client. You know how those people are. I didn't answer. I handed the fruit plate to our son. His words fell into empty space, but something in me had already slowed down. 2 days later, I ran into Kara, a college friend. She works the front desk at a big hotel on Maple Street. We bumped into each other at the supermarket. Kara looked at me for a moment, then asked quietly, "You okay?" What caught my attention wasn't the question. It was her eyes, like she was weighing whether to say something. When I nodded, Kara pulled me to the side. Her voice dropped. "I'm not sure, but I think I saw Trent at the hotel where I work last week." I stayed still. No reaction. Kara went on. "He was with a woman. She was dressed really well. Not the kind of outfit you wear to a meeting. Not a typical client either. I'm not trying to assume anything. They looked close." The way Kara spoke made me believe she wasn't exaggerating. She was giving me exactly what she saw. I thanked her. Kara held my hand, gentle but firm. "If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I thought you should know." I nodded, saying nothing more. When I walked out to the parking lot, the weather had turned cold. The wind pulled at my coat, brushing my wrist with a discomfort that wasn't pain, just the feeling of someone adding another piece to a story you never wanted. That night, I told Trent I'd run into Kara. He turned toward me with that perfectly cute, surprised expression he always used. "Kara who?" "My friend. She works at the Maple Hotel." He paused for exactly one beat. Very short, but long enough for someone like me, who pays attention, to catch it. Then he smiled and touched my shoulder lightly as if to reassure me. "Oh, right. Yeah. I was there with a client last week. Just business. Who do you trust? Your friend or me?" A line too smooth, too natural, warm enough to make the listener feel like they're overreacting. I stayed quiet. Didn't say I believed him. Didn't say I didn't. But inside me, the small dots began touching each other, forming a thin thread. I couldn't see its full shape yet, but I knew it wasn't meaningless anymore. When I lay down that night, the morning envelope came back to me. The paper with the hotel room number, the underlined time, the stranger's words. Earlier, I thought it was a bad joke. Now it didn't feel as random as I'd assumed. I didn't jump to conclusions. I didn't want to turn into someone who doubts everything without proof. I just knew one thing. Something was moving under the calm surface Trent created every night. I still didn't believe he was the man in that hotel room. But for the first time, I wasn't sure he couldn't be. Our son's birthday evening started with the familiar kind of peace. Trent came home earlier than expected, carrying a bag of pastries from our boy's favorite shop. He walked in with that wide smile, the one that once made me believe some people were just born to be good fathers. He lifted our son up, spun him gently, making him laugh out loud. Then he set him down, ruffled his hair and asked, 3 years old today. What do you want to eat?" Our boy pointed at the cake box. Trent laughed, looked at me with eyes warm like the kitchen lights. He opened the fridge, grabbed vegetables, grabbed meat, started prepping dinner. The knife on the cutting board, the smell of butter melting in the pan, his voice chatting with our son. Everything matched the picture of the man my friends always said I was lucky to have. I stood leaning against the kitchen doorway, watching him sprinkle pepper over the meat, his hands steady, his face calm. He glanced at me and winked. "You don't have to do anything tonight. I've got it." I nodded. "Then thank you." He smiled. That smile used to feel real. At least, it once did. When dinner was set on the table, Trent helped our son into his high chair and placed the birthday cake in the center. He lit the candles, leaned close to our boy, and showed him how to blow them out. He looked at that moment as if nothing in the world mattered more than the two of us. If I didn't know about the recent pieces I'd collected, I might have believed this moment was perfect, and it was that perfection that made what happened next cut sharper. Just as we were about to sing Happy Birthday, Trent's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced at the screen. His eyes shifted for a single beat. Tiny, maybe invisible to anyone but me. Then he silenced the call and picked up the phone. "I need to take this," he said. He stepped behind the kitchen door. His voice dropped low. I couldn't make out the words, only the rush hidden under his calm tone. When he came back, his face had already returned to that familiar, easy smile. "I need to step out for a bit," he said, as casually as if he were taking out the trash. "It's urgent. I'll be back soon." Our son looked up at him, asking, "Where are you going, Dad?" Trent bent down, hugged him, kissed his forehead. "Just for a moment. You eat cake with Mom, okay?" I checked the clock. The time written in the envelope. Exact. A cold line ran down my spine, not from pain, but from everything snapping into place in a way I could no longer deny. Trent pulled on his coat, walked to the door, and glanced back at me for half a second. "I'll be back soon." I nodded. Didn't ask. Didn't stop him. He left the house and closed the door softly, like any other busy evening. But tonight, his footsteps were the key turning open the truth I'd avoided for too long. I set the cake in front of my son and let him blow out the candles with a small smile. He didn't understand why his dad had to leave. I didn't say anything that would worry him. I just wanted to keep his innocence separate from whatever was waiting for me next. While he ate his cake, I texted Kara, "Are you at the hotel right now?" Kara replied almost instantly, "Yes. What's going on?" I wrote, "Room 418. Check it for me." 1 minute later, she answered, "That room was booked with Trent's card. Where are you?" I looked at my son one last time, wiped his mouth, then called my mom to come watch him. When she arrived, I only told her I had something urgent to take care of. Before she could ask anything, I grabbed my coat and drove straight to the hotel. The night was dark, the wind strong, the streetlight stretching across the road like a border between two parallel lives, one holding the husband I once trusted, and the other holding the truth I was about to face. I walked into the hotel lobby with steady breaths, not rushed, not shaking. Kara stood behind the counter. Our eyes met for only a second before she looked down at the check-in log. "I guessed right," Kara said without looking at me. "They're in the room." I nodded. "Help me get up there." Kara went into the back room and came out with a staff uniform. Black shirt, long apron, mask, cap. Simple and perfect for covering a face. "I'll prep a tray with fruit and wine. You just bring it up and set it on the table. No one will suspect anything." Kara studied me for a moment, as if making sure I was truly ready. "I'm fine," I said. Not because I was strong, because I no longer had a reason to hide. When the elevator opened on the 4th floor, the hallway was long and silent. I heard my own footsteps, even and light. I held the tray, the cold metal pressing into my palms. I stopped in front of the room 418, knocked twice, not loud, not long. Inside, Trent's voice called out, cheerful enough to freeze me for a second. "Just leave it on the table." He didn't ask who it was. Didn't wonder why room service was coming. Didn't check the peephole. I opened the door. The room was bright, the air thick with a sweet, heavy perfume. The vanity was scattered with lipstick, a purse, a handkerchief. On the bed, Trent was holding a young woman in a tight dress, red lips, her head resting on his shoulder. The smile on his face wasn't the smile he saved for me. It had the freedom of a man who didn't have to act for anyone. She laughed, her hand on his chest. He leaned down to kiss her, long enough that no one could mistake it for surprise. Trent didn't look at me. Didn't notice the hotel staff standing right inside his room. The woman glanced my way but paid no attention, just pointed to the table near the door. I walked over and set the tray down. No shaking, no avoiding their eyes, no emotion pushing through. I looked just long enough to know I could no longer lie to myself. My mind wasn't shocked, just empty. A kind of calm that felt almost cruel. I turned and walked out of the room. No slammed door, no sharp breath. But in my head, another door closed, the kind that never opens again for the person left behind it. That night, about 15 minutes after I left the hotel, my phone buzzed. A text from Trent. "I won't be home. Urgent work." I looked at the screen. A line that once carried weight, once made me worry, once made me ask questions, once made me believe he was genuinely busy. Tonight, it felt so empty it was almost funny. I turned off the screen, didn't reply, I didn't cry, I didn't need time to process. All I felt was a complete stillness, the kind that settles in once the truth is exactly where it belongs, needing no excuses, no explanation. In the days that followed, Trent returned to his familiar routine. Morning, kiss our son, ask if I slept well. Evening, cook dinner, joke around, tell stories about coworkers. His face held no trace of the man who'd held and kissed a young woman in that hotel room. He acted well. Well enough that, if I hadn't stood in that room myself, maybe I would have believed him too. But I had seen it. And once you see an irreversible truth, every performance afterward becomes noise you don't need. I started changing, one thing at a time, small, precise. First, I opened my own account, moved small amounts into it, enough not to draw attention, enough to build what my son and I would need if we left. Next, I started removing personal things, small items no one would notice, a few sets of clothes, personal documents, some of my son's things. I packed them into a suitcase I hid at my mom's house. I found a new place, a small apartment with good light, quiet, close enough for my son's routine. I signed the lease under my name. I looked for more work. My freelance jobs were flexible, but I needed 2 steady clients to make the income stable. I took on 3. I gathered my son's documents, birth certificate, insurance, medical records, put them neatly into a separate folder. Every step was silent. No drama, no trace. Trent suspected nothing, because I didn't change on the surface. I still smiled, still asked what he wanted for dinner, still let him hold our son like everything was normal, still responded to his work stories with the same calm tone. Trent didn't notice a thing, because he'd always looked at the surface of me more than the depth, and that blind spot was exactly what allowed me to leave without a fight. The day I left that house came naturally. It wasn't a special day, not an anniversary, not a meaningful date, just an ordinary morning like every other, which made it feel even more right. Trent left at 7:45, kissed our son, smiled at me, said the same familiar line, "I'll be home early." The door closed behind him. I stood in the silence for 3 seconds. Then I started. I pulled the suitcase from under the bed, opened the closet, took the rest of my clothes and my son's, grabbed his favorite small toys, took the family photo out of its frame, not because I needed it, but because I didn't want to leave something that might confuse him later. I loaded everything into the car. My son held his stuffed animal, not understanding, only asking, "Where are we going, Mom?" I said, "We're going to our new home." He nodded, as naturally as if we were just heading out for another day trip. I stepped back into the house one last time. The kitchen he loved cooking in, the chair he always sat in, the coat he left hanging on the hook. None of it held me. None of it was mine anymore. I wrote a short note and set it on the table, right where he put his keys every night. "You didn't lose me that day. You lost your family." Not long, not explained, not blaming. Just a truth clear enough that it didn't need more words. I locked the door. Didn't look back. No shouting. No dramatic goodbye. Just a woman walking out of the same door she'd walked through for years, lighter than she expected, carrying nothing heavy anymore. I put my son in his car seat, buckled him in, started the engine. As the wheels rolled off the curb, I knew one thing. I wasn't taking anything from Trent except my freedom and the right to raise my child in a place not covered by double-sided words. Not everyone understands the power of leaving quietly, but it's the one thing that forces someone to face the part of themselves they tried hardest to hide. And for Trent, the door closing behind me would be the only thing he couldn't control. The new apartment was small and quiet. Just one bedroom, a small table by the window, and enough space for the two of us to breathe without brushing against old memories. I set the suitcase down and opened the window to let the air in. Nothing in the room carried a familiar scent. No trace of anyone who'd stood here before me. It was empty. But the kind of empty that's healthy, not painful, just clear. My son ran around, curious about every corner. He didn't fully understand the change, but kids accept things more easily than adults. He smiled when he saw the bright spot by the window. I knew I'd chosen the right place. I laid a few simple things on the table. My laptop, my sketchbook, my favorite pencils, things that belonged to me, untouched by anyone's pretending. The room slowly began to carry my breath, not a family I'd held together on my own. I sat on the bed. The lightness was so real it didn't need a name. At the same time in the old house, Trent unlocked the door with the same key he held every day. He called my name, called our sons, his voice bright and cheerful like every other evening. No one answered. He walked into the kitchen. There was no smell of dinner waiting for him. No one at the sink. No small footsteps on the wooden floor. No one asking, "You're home?" Only silence, a kind of silence that hits back, colder than any accusation. He called my name again, louder, sharper. No reply, just the note lying in the middle of the table. He opened it. 2 short lines, the ink firm and steady. "You didn't lose me that day. You lost your family." I wasn't there to see his face, but I knew exactly what that silence would do to him. The emptiness, the panic, the disorientation, the kind of feeling that only comes when someone loses what they assumed would always stay. My phone kept lighting up. The first message, "Moraine, where are you?" "I'm home." Then, "Can we talk?" Then, "Please, let me explain." I let the screen go dark and set the phone aside, not because I was angry. I just had no interest in returning to a man who'd made me soothe myself with hope for years. When he called the 7th time, I turned the ringer off and switched to silent mode, not to hide, just to keep myself from being pulled back into the same cycle. In the days that followed, my new life settled into a strangely calm rhythm. I worked more, took on projects I actually enjoyed, took my son on afternoon walks, bought a few small things for the apartment to make it feel like a real home. I was steady, light, but sharp in every choice I made. My son adjusted quickly. He asked about his dad, but not with sadness, just the innocent curiosity of a 3-year-old. I told him his dad still loved him, but that we were living in different places now. Kids don't need painful truths. They need safety. I didn't look back. Didn't wait for Trent to regret anything. Regret wasn't something I needed from him. I needed space. Space where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit inside someone else's life. As for Trent, he began sinking into the emptiness he never imagined he'd feel. No one sitting beside him at dinner. A house suddenly too big, too cold. No sound of our son laughing. No warmth waiting at the door. It was the first time he truly understood the value of what he'd taken for granted. Regret that arrives late is always the kind that cuts the deepest. That night, I stood by the window of the new apartment, the street lights casting a soft glow across the floor. My son slept quietly in the other room. The sky was dark but calm, as if it had cleared away all the noise I used to carry. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt like I'd returned to the right place, the place of someone who chooses peace for herself. When you're still together, cherish each other. Don't wait until you lose something to understand its worth. That's the end of the story. Thank you for staying until the last moment. If it were you, in Moraine's place, would you walk away or give him another chance? Share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episode.